In this video, we want to discuss the MultiCloner object from Forester. The MultiCloner is a cloning object slightly similar to the MoGraph cloner in Cinema 4D, but with many more enhancements and features. What we're looking here is a distribution of grass clones from Multiflora over a planar surface. I have 5 grass objects, each one with a different color, from blue, purple, yellow, red, and green. And these are distributed over the plane. In this case, it's a landscape object with a 0 height. And the distribution is distorted with a noise function. We're going to take this example to introduce the MultiCloner object. So here I have a new scene. What I'm going to do is create a landscape object, and I'm going to set the size, say, to 1000 by 100 by 1000. I'm going to uncheck multifractal, and I'm going to uncheck borders at sea level. So this is what I have at this stage. I'm going to give this a material, and I want to make this material a matte material, which means it has no specular component. And I'm going to make it slightly darker, like so. Now I'm going to create a Multiflora object. This is going to be a simple grass object, but I'm going to reduce the per node count to 15 grass blades. So that's what I have now. And what I want to do is give it a material. And while I'm here, I'm going to create other materials, say 5, each one having a different color. So I'll color them in a gradient fashion from red to yellow to green, and then blue, and then purple. Also, I'm going to make these materials non-shiny. I'll assign the first material, red for example, to the grass. Now I would like to scatter the grass over the landscape surface. To do that, it's very easy. I just create a MultiCloner object, and I make the Multiflora or the grass a child of the MultiCloner like this. Now all I have to do is specify a distribution geometry under distribute on geometry. So I'll just drag the landscape geometry, and right off the bat I get a bunch of points distributed over that surface. Now if I deselected the MultiCloner object, the points disappear. But if I did a full render, then the points reappear. The reason for that is that the display is set to points and keep points visible is unchecked. If I do check that, the points will stay visible even if the MultiCloner is not selected. And here I can change the color of the points. Of course, it's not the color of the distributed geometry, but of the point display over here. So I'm going to make it slightly brighter. If I wanted to display the geometry, all I have to do is uncheck display points, and I will see the red grass blades displayed like so. Render instances means that these are instances, so if I grab the MultiCloner and I make it editable, I'm going to see that I have 100 instances plus the original geometry, which is the Multiflora. I would like to have more clones, so I'll scroll down, and under scatter parameters I have the clone count set to 100. If I want to have 1000, I'll just type 1000. Alright, now I would like to have them different materials as the ones that I have over here. So I'm gonna select the Multiflora, and I'll just make 4 other copies, and each one is gonna have a different material. Of course, each one can be a different object altogether, but for the sake of this demonstration now, I'm just going to keep them set to grass. Now I did change the materials, but the display in the viewport did not change. For that I have to update the distribution, and then I will see the distribution update like so. I can go to each Multiflora object and still edit it. For example, I can go to the first one and change the randomization, and I'll see that the result updates in real time in this case, because you only have to update the distribution whenever you have new children added to the MultiCloner. But any change you apply to any of the children is reflected directly under the MultiCloner object. You can reduce the size for one of them. For example, here I'm making the red ones smaller. I can make them bigger, and you see the result display like this. I can, for example, take the orange ones and just choose whatever I want from the library, and the result will update in real time. I'm going to undo that though, because for now we're just going to talk about the distribution of the clones over the surface. So I'll go back up here. I'm going to lock my selection. What I'm going to look at is the distribution pattern. The distribution pattern by default is set to random distribution, which means that the clones are scattered randomly. If I give this a render, I'm going to get exactly the same thing as I see in the viewport. If I do a preview render from here, or if I do an interactive region render, I'm going to get the same thing. But if I go down to my clone count, which is set to 1000, let's say that I want to have 10,000 of these. You can just add a 0 here and you're going to get 10,000, but it might be a bit too much for the viewport display. It would be okay if your display was set to points, and especially if you uncheck keep points visible, then you will not be affected at all by the point count, and the rendering will actually feature the rendered geometry. So that's a good optimization tip here. But there is also another way. So I'm going to uncheck display points to keep the display set to geometry, and I'm going to scroll down, and here I'm going to set this back to 1000, and under render count multiplier I'll just multiply this by 10, which means that the render count is going to be 10,000, 1000 multiplied by 10. So if I give this a render, I'm going to get 10,000 in the render, while my viewport is still very manageable because I have a small amount of clones in my viewport. Of course, I can increase this to whatever I like. So this is 100,000, and you see that the translation of these is pretty fast. So I'm not gonna stop the recording. I'm just gonna see how much time it's gonna take to translate. Actually, it took 13 seconds to translate 100,000 clones and start the render. So this is very manageable still.